This is again the Green Neighborhood Initiative coming to you live from radio, riverwestradio.com. My name is Eric the Green Guy. We'll be discussing various ways to live in harmony with nature. If you have any questions or comments, please give us a call at 414-935-2951. Again, it's 935-2951. Hello. There we go. Once again, this is Eric at the Green Neighborhood, coming from you live from Riverwest Radio. Our number here is 414-935-2951. Again, it's 414-935-2951. If you have questions or comments or whatnot to help us better live in harmony with nature. This is Eric the Green Guy coming to you live from Riverwest Radio. Again, this radio broadcast is dedicated to the one I love, the mighty one, mighty Aminata. Well, today we have a beautiful day, and last weekend we had the Energy Summit up in Wisconsin, talking about ways of sustainable living. Anyone has any interesting experiences about the Energy Fair last week in Cutler, Wisconsin, please feel free to call in and share that experience and information with us. Today we got some good information coming to you. We've been going through here and there from several books. One is the Green Goes With Everything by Sloan Barnett. Green Goes With Everything, Simple Steps to a Healthier Life and Cleaner Planet. Then, of course, there's The Green Consumer by John Elkington and Julia Hales. You can buy products that don't cost the earth. And today we're also going to be introducing Seeing Green by Jonathan Porritt. Seeing Green, the politics of ecology explained. And then, of course, there's Blueprint for a Green Blueprint for a Green Planet by John Seymour. One of the things I like about Blueprint for a Green Planet is that the book talks about several good things, which we can go through right now. Just skim through the table of contents. Blueprint for a Green Planet by John Seymour. A guide to restoring the planet's environment. What it covers is house cleaning in the age of waste. One of my favorite subjects. Real or processed water. It's a good thing. Farming for the future. Food for health or wealth. Dismantling the garbage mountain. And curing the cleanliness obsession. Gardening without chemicals, the low energy house, the answer to your car pollution and action beyond the home. Let's start with real or processed water. Real or processed water. Bottled water is one of my favorite subjects. Cutting down or on overconsumption, practical water conservation in the home, getting our waste back to the land, household water pollution and how to prevent it, diffusing the nitrate time bomb, making water polluters pay. The substance that makes this planet so different from any other that we know of is water. Other planets may have some of it, but the Earth should really be called the water planet, for water covers most of it. This is why it looks blue and white from space. The white is from the water vapor, the blue is from the water. And of course, all forms of life depend upon water. The part of the world's water that we must consider is the freshwater part, for that is what chiefly concerns us as creatures of the land. At least 97% of all the world's water is salt. Like nearly all natural processes, the changing of salt water to fresh and back to salt again is cyclical. Water is evaporated from the seas by the heat of the sun and it leaves its salt behind. Wind blows it inland where some of it falls to earth as rain where it makes possible the growth of plants and us. Then by one route or another it returns to the sea where it's mixed with salt again. Living in harmony with nature. Man, like other terrestrial animals, interrupts this cycle. We intercept water somewhere on its passage from the sky to the sea, make use of it, almost always pollute it in some way in doing so, and then send it back on its journey to the sea again. As every year goes by, the amount of water that gets diverted from the natural cycle steadily grows. In most temperate countries, there's plenty of it. In fact, we may sometimes think too much of the stuff rain down on us from the skies. In Britain, for example, too many Welsh valleys have had to be dammed and flooded, villages, churches, graveyards, and all, to meet the apparently insatiable demands of the English cities. So basically, the water cycle, part one, where water comes from. All tap water begins life as rain, trickled into streams, from there into rivers. Although this water may look clean, there is now hardly such a thing as pure water. From the moment it forms rain until it completes its journey to the sea, water is polluted by man's activities. Well, let's consider irrigation. In industrialized countries, up to 80% of all the untreated fresh water is used for irrigation. Using large quantities of water on the land can lower the water table and increase the soil salt contents. From there, we go to the factory farm slurry. Intensive animal farming produces huge volumes of liquid animal manure concentrated in small areas. This finds its way into rivers where it contaminates the water. Then, of course, we have fertilizer pollution. Up to half of the artificial fertilizer used by today's farmers is washed out of the soil and into rivers, as well as disrupting water life. The nitrate it contains often contaminates drinking water. The pesticide problem. Agricultural pesticides do not all decompose after use. Some are carried by rain into the water that we eventually drink. You have biocide spray, all types of good stuff, yummy things. Then, of course, there's the polluted rain. The starting point for all fresh water is rain. Atmospheric pollution from factories and cars can make rainwater acid before it reaches the ground. The effect of acid rain. Even far upstream, acidification may exact a toll on wildlife. Fish are particularly sensitive to changes in the acidity of water and often the first animals to disappear. This can happen in streams that appear to be pure and unpolluted. Soil erosion. When heavy rain falls on modern peristyle fields, hundreds of tons of topsoil can be washed into rivers, creating silt and impoverishing the land. Polluted water. After flowing through intensively worked farmland, the water quality and wildlife balance of a river are seriously upset. Drowning the land so that we can overflush our toilets, wash our cars, and water our gardens. More and more prime farmland has to be drowned for water storage. Underground water. In dry regions, most tap water comes from deep under the ground. Rain may take centuries to trickle into these reservoirs. It is often pumped out faster than it is replenished. Diverted to land, water for human use is pumped out of the rivers into treatment plants where it is stored and then chemically processed. In built up areas, this water extraction can seriously deplete a river's natural flow. Okay, now we're ready for distribution. Once treated and sterilized, the chemical laden water begins its journey to factories and to the home. Water treatment. River water is filtered and chemically sanitized to prevent us being poisoned by the waterborne waste that it carries. Chlorine and copper sulfate are just two of the toxic chemicals which may be used to sterilize it. What? What? Where? Avenue? Turn right, man. Avenue? Part 2. Part 2. How water is used and polluted. Once water has been treated, it is distributed for use. The amount we consume through drinking and eating is completely eclipsed by that use in our homes and factories. And almost every gallon of it is polluted before being thrown away. Underground contamination. Buried industrial metals and solvents can seep through the ground to reach streams and rivers. No one yet knows what long-term effects these will have. Salt from roads. Every winter, millions of tons of salt are spread on the road where ice is a problem for traffic. Much of the salt is washed into the streams and rivers where it harms both animals and plants. Then there's water's hidden uses. Factories use quantities of water to make consumer products. Up to 120,000 gallons of water can be used in washing, cooling, and processing the components that make up a car. Industries' liquid waste. Most of the water used and contaminated by inland industries is discharged directly into the sewer system, loading it with chemicals that are impossible to remove. Lost during distribution. Our complex water distribution systems are not always watertight. Up to a fifth of water is lost before it reaches the tap, leaking away through fractured pipes and badly fitting seals. Runoff from garbage dumps. Domestic garbage, which is buried in landfill sites, produces soluble chemical pollutants. These can be carried through porous ground into the local river system. You gotta watch out from water from treatment plants, industrial waste sites, factory culverts, detergent foam, chemical slick. And then one of my personal favorites, waste from the home. Water leaves the home laden with chemical and organic waste. Lightly and heavily polluted water is mixed together, so all of it must be sent to a sewage works for treatment. Pollution from household chemicals. Today's householder has an armory of chemicals that are used for washing and combating germs. These are often overused with disastrous results further along the water cycle. The urban population, by the time a river has passed through heavily built up areas, floating garbage and dissolved chemicals severely reduce the natural inhabitants of the increasingly polluted water. Chemical dumping. Much of the pollution of urban waterways comes from the careless dumping of substances as a car oil and do it yourself solvents. Many of these are poisonous to fish. So, true enough, companies, industrial complexes distribute chemicals in our water which are not good for us. But what we can directly control and influence is the pollution from household chemicals, the waste from our homes. We can do something about that by using household cleaning products and solutions and personal home care products that are biodegradable. The water cycle. What happens to wastewater? Part 3. Part 3. Drugs in river water. Many drugs are excreted in urine and therefore find their way into rivers. Hormones used in contraception are now reaching detectable levels in some urban rivers. Reducing fertility may result if they are passed on into drinking water. After using and polluting the water, we throw it away. It's easy to pull a plug or flush a toilet. Getting rid of the waste this produces is a lot more difficult. As wastewater approaches its final destination, the sea, an alarming number of potentially dangerous substances it contains find their way back to land. Water without oxygen. Waterborne waste uses up oxygen as it decomposes. In a polluted river, the oxygen debt may reach a level at which fish cannot survive. In some urban rivers, oxygen is bubbled into the water to keep fish alive. Meanwhile, back into the river, after treatment, sewage rejoins the natural water cycle, adding to the chemical strain already overburdened river. Sewage ponds. In places where sewage sludge is not used on the land or dumped at sea, it is poured into deep ponds from where it seeps into the surrounding land. Cleaning up waterborne waste. Organic matter in sewage is biologically digested at the sewage farm. This process, which relies on bacteria, can be wrecked by antibiotics, bleach, and other common household products. Passing on pollution. As successful intakes draw off river water, the proportion of used water grows. If you live far enough downstream, your water will almost certainly have been used by a number of people before it reaches your tap. Contaminated sludge. In theory, sewage sludge should be an excellent source of cheap fertilizer. However, the industrial and household pollutants that it contains can make it a hazardous substance. Effluent filled estuaries. Where a river meets the sea, waterborne pollutants are spread along the coast. Tidal mud becomes particularly contaminated by them. Sewage soaked beaches. Much of the coast throughout the world's most heavily populated region is contaminated with effluent. Even a of seawater may contain millions of bacteria which originate in human intestines. Mmm, yummy. Dumping at sea. In some countries, sewage sludge is loaded into barges and dumped offshore. The chemicals in the sludge then become incorporated in the marine food chain, bringing pollution back to land. Many marine animals feed by collecting particles suspended in seawater, among them plastic. Among these are substances which can flow down our rivers. These appear in our food when fish and shellfish are brought ashore. Thus, the cycle begins again. From the moment clean water vapor rises into the air on its journey to become rain, the man made pollution of the water cycle begins once again. Here's a list of the world's thirstiest countries. Daily totals. These are the daily totals. Millions of gallons. Or another way we can put it is how many gallons per person does a person use? How many gallons of water does a person use in the United States? Well, Switzerland 77. United States approximately 1,668 gallons of water per person in a year. Some of water's hidden uses, a large amount of everybody's daily water consumption is accounted for by the manufacture of products destined for your home. Gasoline. If you average about 6 gallons of gasoline per week, you're probably consuming 6,000 gallons of water. If you're buying and purchasing plastic, let's say 2.2 pounds of plastic per week, you're indirectly using 22,000 gallons of water. If you drink 1 can of soda pop per day, we as Americans average, let's say, about 29,000 gallons of water per day. This is what is referred to in some respects as your virtual water usage. Typically, virtual water consumption pertains to the food that we consume, which is not locally developed food, but food that is raised or grown in areas away from where we consume it, other states, and thus using their water in the process. Let's talk about some practical water conservation at home. There used to be a saying. 1977, during a severe drought in California, people were hanging up signs in their lavatories which proclaimed the following sensible injunction. If it's brown, wash it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. They had good reason for this. A quarter of all domestic water in most countries goes straight down the toilet. Every time someone flushes the toilet, about 5 gallons of water are instantly changed from being pure to being polluted. If installing a dual water system in your home is impossible at present, there are plenty of practical ways with which you can reduce your consumption of processed water without making a lot of difference to your standard of living. And a toilet is a good place to start. Conventional toilet in the United States use about 5 gallons of water every time it's used. The common low flush toilet 3.5 gallons. The wash down about 1.5 gallons, and the air assisted about half a gallon. One average bath contains enough water to keep a shower going for about 15 minutes. One old fashioned water saving device which should be brought back in every home is the water butt. It's true that our rainwater may not be as chemically clean as it was in the past thanks to atmospheric acidity, but don't let this put off you collecting it. Although it may not be clean enough to drink, it's certainly good for cleaning your car and watering the garden. But remember, rainwater and treated water are two different substances. The liquid that comes out of your tap is prepared using unpleasant and even harmful chlorine. The less treated water we use, the less of this potentially dangerous chemical we make, and the less we need to have around. What happens to waterborne waste? Now, what happens to water when we have finished boiling it? Well, a quarter of it, as we discover, goes down the toilet. The rest goes down various drains like the other, end up in sewer systems. Then, apart from a rising proportion which leaks out of crumbling 19th century brick sewers, it eventually gets to some sort of sewage treatment plant. Here, the solids are allowed to settle out in liquids after bacteria action are pumped into the nearest river. Water in the home. How is water used once it arrives in the home? And what potential is there for reducing the quantities used? Washing and bathing. 27% approximately. 27% potential for reduction. You can reduce your water consumption by using the shower with a low flow aerator or shower head. 24% goes from toilet use. You can buy a low flow toilet or simply place a plastic bottle in the tank, maybe a 2 liter, for every time you flush. You're flushing 2 liters less of water. So, some simple positive action. Choose water efficient appliances and apply water conservation techniques. Get a rain barrel. The sewage business in a large urban sewage treatment. In large urban sewage treatment works a great quantum. What is a dual water system? There are two supply pipes. One provides pure drinking water to the kitchen, the other provides treated water to all other taps and appliances. Wastewater leaves the house through two separate pipes. One carries sewage, which is returned to the land after composting, while the other contains used water, which is returned to the water cycle. Household water pollution and how to prevent it. One of the chief obstacles that stand in the way of wholesale effluent recycling is the fact that it is often poisonous. Most people are probably aware of the problems of industrial effluent, but fewer realize that it's not only uncaring big business that is responsible for water pollution. The ordinary householder can also poison and pollute the water cycle. Action on this front therefore begins with putting our own houses in order. It is ironic, having put so much effort into taking pollutants out of our tap water, we start putting them back in as soon as the water reaches our homes. Of all the water used in the home, only a tiny fraction, perhaps 5%, escapes some form of chemical adulteration caused by detergents, bleaches, and scouring powders. Until the 1930s, the only man made chemical that went out with the dishwater was soap. Until 19 until the 1930s, the only man-made chemical that went out with the dishwater was soap, a fairly innocuous substance. Even in moderate concentration, it is harmless to life in lakes and rivers. Soap has since been superseded by a range of powerful synthetic substances commonly found in dishwashing liquid, laundry detergent, bubble baths, shampoo, and cosmetics. A squirt of liquid detergent in your dishwasher water adds one of the most difficult pollutants problems currently affecting our water cycle: the overabundance of chemical food in water. Detergents may not sound much like food, but they often contain phosphates, which for plants are important growth materials. Algae run riot in water with high levels of phosphates. When phosphate rich dishwater runs down the drain and into the waterways, the algae pounce on this abundant supply of nourishment. Thus, previously clear water begins to resemble something much more like pea soup, thick and green. This may sound harmless, but for many water organisms, it has terrible side effects. Water life needs dissolved oxygen. In eutrophic water, or water that's been, you know, too much algae, too much food in there, plants take up so much of the oxygen that there is little left over for the water life. Fish and other animals begin to suffocate. The plants continue to multiply and rot down. Eventually, the water becomes clogged and lifeless. There is absolutely no need for this to happen because detergents without phosphates exist and are effective. There's pollution from solvents, the second area of household water pollution. Concerns use of oil-based products and solvents. One thing that is guaranteed to harm freshwater life is a film of impermeable oil floating on the surface, cutting the water off from the atmosphere. Three-quarters of all the oil contamination at sea is estimated to come from land. Although much of this is from industry, the householder who tips a half-used can of old gloss paint down the outside drain is equally guilty of appalling thoughtlessness. Paint, turpentine, and all other oils and solvents should never be poured away like this. If you really have to dispose of them, the safest place is a very deep hole below the topsoil, subsoil boundary, and well away from any trees. Also, wow, this is really messed up. There's the nitrate time bomb. The nitrate time bomb. Nitrates are an important constituent of artificial fertilizer. If you put nitrates on a growing crop, the plant will take up some of them, but they are never all absorbed in this way. Nitrates are very soluble, and the first rainstorm or soaking from an irrigation spray will wash them down into the soil. Research has shown that it takes from 20 to 40 years for this nitrate to seep downwards to the depth reached by borehole wells. Therefore, the nitrate that farmers are putting on their soil now will not only appear in drinking water for every 20, 40 years. Farmers did not start using extensive amounts of nitrate until about 40 years ago, and they did not start using really massive amounts until the 60s and 70s. So we have yet to experience the full effects of this. Oh yeah, I forgot about this here. Welcome to the Green Neighborhood. My name is Eric, the Green Guy. I'm the producer of the show. The things you will hear over the next remaining 20 minutes or 15 minutes represent the views of the Green Neighborhood and myself. All opinions and quotations in no way represent the River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program. Water pollution begins at home. Water pollution is not something created simply by factories run by uncaring big business. All of us are to some extent responsible for the other side of water pollution. That created by carefree use of detergents, bleaches, scouring powders, and a host of other household products. Washing machine. Many laundry detergents contain polluting phosphates, and some types still create foam problems, although to a large extent this adverse effect has been eliminated. Fabric softener is relatively harmless in moderation. Gardening. Garden chemicals enter the water cycle when they are carried from the garden to ponds and streams. Herbicides and pesticides may kill aquatic wildlife. Fertilizers cause uncontrolled growth of water plants. Okay, that's better. The outside drain. This is where the very worst of the household pollution takes place. Pouring do it yourself chemicals down the outside drain ensures that they go directly into the water cycle. Kitchen sink. Liquid dishwashing detergents are often a serious source of phosphate pollution. Scouring powder contains bleach, which is poisonous to the bacteria which decompose sewage. Let's see here. How to reduce home water pollution. The main problem with liquid detergents, the main problem with these is their phosphate content. Use phosphate free or low phosphate dishwashing liquid if you can obtain it. If not, try reducing the quantity you use. Laundry detergents. No one with a wash machine can avoid using these. However, try experimenting with reduced quantities. Remember, manufacturers have an interest in making you use more than is actually necessary. Bleach and scouring powders. Again, the problem here is one of quantity. Very dilute bleach left to work for longer is just as effective as strong solution poured away after a few minutes. Water fresheners. Don't use them. They do not freshen water at all. Rather, they pollute it with synthetic perfumes and colors. Garden chemicals. If you garden organically using only natural products in the garden, you will avoid causing any water contamination. Okay, we're going to switch up. Now we're going to talk about a little bit something from Seeing Green. by Jonathan Porritt. The sense of estrangement. Mindless materialism. There is no doubt that the attempt to do away with metaphysics was for the most part carried through by people with the best and purest motives, but in their belief that the better side of human nature will flourish in the secular world, as it had never flourished in the spiritual world, they have been utterly confounded. Of their inspired humanitarianism, we've managed to make an uncaring and life destroying metaphysics all of its own. Individualism alone cannot provide people with a yardstick for their own genuine self interest. The tragedy of the commons remains the simplest explanation of this fundamental truth. In pre-industrial Britain, farmers grazed their sheep and cattle on the commons and everyone benefited from such a sharing. But imagine if one or two farmers suddenly realized they could maximize their own individual interests by grazing more animals than their neighbors. To begin with, things would be fine, but suppose others noticed what was going on and realized they had better do otherwise. Likewise, in no time at all, the commons would be destroyed through overgrazing, and then who benefits? Managing our wealth. In so different a world, the very notion of economics will itself be up for grabs. If we're being strictly accurate, this word too is sorely misused. It has the Greek root as ecology, namely okios, a house, and the word nomos means to manage. Theologians use the word economia to explain God's dispensation here on earth, but since the Middle Ages, the standard of management has declined drastically. Gandhi said the earth provides enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. The dividing line between wants and needs is a hard one to draw, but not drawing it will make things even harder. And yet, the notion of human wants as essentially unlimited, given the right kind of technological breakthroughs, is the starting point for many an economic analysis. We cannot really envision a new age unless we realize that some of our wants and so called needs are quite spurious. Ecologist's ideal definition of work is therefore defined. It should provide a reasonable standard of living, be personally satisfying, be environmentally sound, be socially useful, and be available for everyone who wants it. All right, we're about to wrap up with the Green Neighborhood. Thank you for your attention. We'll be back next week, Monday at 5, between 5 and 5:55. Thank you, and signing off.